reason. There is the social factors, and then the psychological factors. It's biopsychosocial model of disease. We've been talking about that in public health for years, but it's actually more relevant to this more than ever. So biologically, it's a virus that thrives in cold, like other viruses, they thrive, the infectivity is high in cold environments because there's poor ventilation, we tend to stay indoors more, humidity is higher, and so infectivity is higher in that context. So people who stay indoors more will have more susceptibility to that virus. Now, the other biological factor that is important is the dose of inoculation. So 2 people have COVID, but one might have been inoculated with a bigger dose, and one might have been inoculated with a smaller dose. Now, 2 of them can have different disease depending on their relative immunity at that time.
No, I'm using the laptop. Some of it spilled, that's
why. Can we mute the...
Mr. Goro, can you please mute Mr. Goro?
Can the admin people please mute people who are not speaking? I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, so it's okay. The dose you get, your immunity at the time you get it, and also determine how sick you are. If you have a big dose of a virus, you inhale a big sort of dose of virus at a time when you're not feeling great, you've just recovered from an illness, or you're relatively just a bit down or stressed or depressed and stuff like that, where your immunity is a bit low, then your susceptibility is high. The other things about biological factors of the virus that have been talked about are host immune systems, optimization of host immune systems. And in this platform, one that might have been going around in the circles is vitamin D. That we of Afro-Caribbean and an Asian origin living in the West, we have relative vitamin D deficiency. Now that's a fact, that's true. We have relative vitamin D deficiency. We know that vitamin D has a role in augmenting viral immunity. But what we don't know is whether there's a causative link. As an intensivist, what I do know is that if you're coming into intensive care and your vitamin D levels are low, your mortality is higher. That's established. That's not maybe yes or no. We know that if you put all people who are coming into intensive care for any disease below vitamin D, those with lower vitamin D are of a higher mortality. They tend to do worse. The problem is in ITU, we can't really augment it very well. So that's one of the biological factors. Now, the social factors, which are also really, really important. And one of the big social factors, which Dr. Wajid might be very familiar with, is obesity in primary care. And I'll be honest with you, if you come to my ITU in the last 6 months, all my patients are over 100 kilos. And if you look at the PHE data, if your BMI, that your body mass index is over 30, the population incidence of COVID in people whose BMI is over 30 is higher than the incidence of BMI over 30 overall in our population. So to put that in simple terms, if the BMI of 40 has a population incidence of 30% of population, the proportion of people who have COVID, who are very sick, who are ending up in ITU, is actually higher than 30%, is actually nearing 46%. So obesity has a role. Why does obesity have a role? There's so many things in research have been looked at it. We know that obesity is an inflammatory condition, and some people think people who are obese are primed to have a hyper reaction to any inflammatory conditions, hence why probably they're sicker. The other thing that we found is diabetes. Patients, inherently all our patients have either undiagnosed diabetes or they are known diabetic. And we know diabetes in the remit of what we call metabolic syndrome is also an inflammatory condition. So that's some of the factors. Things like deprivations are also being talked about. And actually, the Office of National Statistics has done a lot of work to look at what the impact of deprivation, and they have what they call deprivation indexes, and found that people in higher areas of deprivation tend to have are more likely to be hospitalized with COVID than people in non-deprived areas. And if you look at it, it makes a bit of sense, poor hygiene, poor diet hygiene, obesity, living in overcrowded conditions, they all promote the tendency to have COVID. So all these factors have actually come together. Now, the last part is psychological bit. We know very well from the previous census data is that we from Afro-Caribbean and Asian backgrounds have very poor health-seeking behavior. And it's because, one, we're stoical. You don't want to just go to hospital. So you feel a bit ill and you just trundle along and think, you know, I'm okay. I'm going to be all right. I don't need to go to doctors. And because of that, that has a very, very poor correlation with COVID. In COVID, we have a group of people we call silent hypoxic. So they have very low oxygen levels, but they look well. It baffled us at the beginning of COVID. You get someone coming into A&E, looking well, talking in full sentences, but his oxygen levels are so low, and they've been low for a long time. What we're now understanding is that because that patient has had COVID for a while, the lung destruction is continuing, and those patients who are presenting with really low oxygen levels really late to hospital do worse. So those are kind of some of the factors that we've kind of put together, and there's some primary care interventions which I think are fantastic, which look at monitoring patients at home with SATs, with a SATs probe, with an oxygen probe, which I think is really good because it means that even if you feel well and your oxygen levels are dropping, you need to go to hospital. So it takes away that delay. So there's some of the factors. There's so many other sort of nuanced factors, and you know, we're all different. We're genetically different. There's a trial called Genomic Trial, which has looked at, is actually published now, looked at several genetic factors that might have predisposed people to COVID, and they've identified certain genes. And a lot of work is still going on in these areas. But if you look at the psychological and the social factors, which are a lot of things we can control, they have a huge contribution into why, you know, some people are having COVID more than others, suffering from COVID more than others.
Jazakumullah khair for your answer there. I mean, Dr. Wajid, I mean, what has your experience been in the community regarding patients with this and some of the sort of predisposing factors that Dr. Yusuf has mentioned?
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair. I think Dr. Yusuf mentioned all the points, but I just want to highlight to my brothers and sisters, you know, many of us, we are, including myself, we're not healthy. Let's be honest, yeah? And one of the big reasons is because our food is the best food in the world, okay? You can't argue with that. I think, we have, all our food is brilliant. Anywhere you go in the Muslim world, whether it's Arab food, Turkish food, Indian food, Nigerian food, it's fantastic. I've had all of it. But it comes at a price. And the price is, we're a bit big. Not this like humongous. We always think that because our stomach is not, you know, like an elephant, that we're not big. It just needs to be a little bit bigger here around your belly. That's the danger area. And we all thought, including me, it's okay, it's not a problem now. It'll be a problem when I'm 80. You know, it'll be a problem when I'm 70. No, not right now. Okay, I don't know, I don't do exercise. You know, we see all the white English people, they're always wearing the exercise clothes, they're going to the gym. We don't go to the gym. I mean, I know some of the youngsters, you know, they'll go just to get the bulk up for the social media or whatever, but majority of us, we don't go to the gym, we don't do exercising. It's not us. You know, most of the Muslim community, we're not healthy. But we also thought, no problem, it's not going to be a problem until I'm old. Well, COVID has shown it's a problem now. It's a problem now. It's a big problem now. And in some ways this is good, because we have a lot of diabetes in our communities. We have a lot of heart attack. My younger brothers, they work in the heart attack center in London. They tell me the same thing. They say if someone comes in with a heart attack under 50, 100% is going to be Muslim. Because under 50, you don't expect, why is someone under 50 getting a heart attack? 40-year-old, 35-year-old, why are they getting a heart attack? They say 100% is going to be Muslim. And you can understand why. We have perfect fried chicken. We have this fried chicken, that fried chicken. Every other store on our high street is a chicken store. We have food. We don't exercise. So this is my plea to the Muslim community, and for each of my brothers and sisters watching this. This is time to get. Don't wait. Now is the time to tell your family this is not acceptable anymore. This is not acceptable. This is not acceptable anymore. Let's get ourselves healthy and safe, inshallah.
No, Jazakumullah khair for your answer there. I'm just going to ask Dr. Balogun, inshallah, being involved in the management of these patients in the hospitals, and the effect that has been having on the hospital, the pressures that sort of COVID patients have been having on the hospital and their wards. If we can just shed a little bit of light on that itself, and how this is something that is very important, and it needs to be taken very seriously, and all the measures that have been discussed need to be considered and put forward. Now, Jazakallah
khair. I've already mentioned to the moderator with regards to my camera, so please accept my apologies with regards to that. Your question is important. The COVID-19 virus pandemic and the after effects has shown us within the NHS that there's a lot that is outstanding to be done. And we learned a lot during the first wave. And we thought that was the peak of it. And when the second wave came, it came with a big bang. And it's put a lot of pressure on the hospital. I'll give you instances. So the way the Gold Command was designed, so it was a national initiative wherein patients are meant to be triaged from the front door into whether they are going via the COVID-19 pathway or the non-COVID-19 pathway. And if you go to the emergency department during the COVID-19, at the peak of the crisis, virtually all parts of the COVID-19 area of the emergency department was full. Not only that, doctors, quite a number of doctors were also infected. It got to a point, I think, towards the end of December, wherein we had 1/3 of the junior doctors were infected, unwell, and they were not in the hospital. And at that point, and you have to keep the system going. That's on the workforce. Similar reporting on the part of the nurses, allied healthcare professionals. And the same pathway from the front door extended to the back end of the hospital, wherein you have the COVID-19 part of the hospital and the non-COVID-19 part of the hospital. At peak admissions, the whole medical ward was full of patients, as in we had almost 95% admission, and it was all COVID. It got to a point, because whatever is done in one part of the country, it mirrors what happens on the other parts. When hospitals in London started thinking of admissions onto the pediatric ward, similarly, other hospitals in the rest of the hospital, in the rest of the country, started opening up wards wherein children were admitted, to pave way, to create the bed space. The same thing affected the women's health department, where we had to open up some of the wards, and the patients were very unwell. And as Dr. Kim Yusuf had already mentioned, the ones that have underlying health conditions were more unwell, and the death rate went high. So within our community, I'm sure we're going to get to that, wherein a lot of people, we're still talking about the conspiracy theories, and we've had photographs and videos of people showing corridors of hospitals that, listen, is empty. It wasn't empty. The number of accident and emergency departments had patients on the corridor because the ones that were in, so when COVID-19 patients come in, they stay longer in the hospital. Either they go into the intensive care unit, and even when they stay in the hospital, they are in for 10, 14 days, even 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or thereabouts. So the virus has come to show, it consumes everything on its way, manpower, resources. You also got to a point that trusts across the country were running low in oxygen, and criteria to be reviewed as to how much oxygen you give. Perhaps if we're giving too much, perhaps we're not giving enough, and all that had to be reviewed, balanced against other variables that could affect patients' outcome. In a nutshell, it has used up the resources, and alhamdulillah, that things are beginning to ease.
Naam, Jazakumullah khair for your answer there. So a few people have asked a few questions on the chat group. I'm just going to go through some of those now. The first one was let me just have a look. Right. Okay. So okay. So the first question was. Okay, so now I think people are asking a little bit about the vaccine now. So we'll just start asking some questions regarding the current vaccine. As we know, that there's been sort of a worldwide effort to produce a vaccine for this condition since it started. And there has been one or two sort of sayings and claims that people have been mentioning. And one of the questions that was mentioned by someone from the group is, I was told that there is a microchip in the vaccine. Please, can you educate me? So, inshallah, if anyone from the panelists can take that question, inshallah. The person's been told that there are microchips in the vaccine.
Can I? I'm just gonna share my screen just to show. Is that okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Can you all see?
Yes.
So I actually anticipated this question because I'll be honest with you, it is the most I get asked about COVID-19 by friends, family, and people who meet me for the first time and ask me, are you a doctor? So, oh, what do you think about COVID-19? And I mean, this information is freely available. So the first really very firm statement about the vaccine is that there is no microchip in the vaccine, not at all. There is absolutely no animal products in the vaccine, and there's no microchip in it. It is basically a fluid medium, so it's basically water with some salts in it, and the vaccine particle. And these are all the vaccines that you might have heard of. All these vaccines, of particular in the UK, the two vaccines you're probably going to be exposed to are the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine. Moderna is close to coming into the fray, and we're currently doing trials in the UK about the Janssen vaccine. We're doing it in Leicester and a few other centers around the UK. And we're also doing it in kids, and we're now doing it in pregnant women as well. So this is what the vaccine looks like. And please, I'm saying this not because I'm saying to be firm about this, because I know a lot of things have been said about this. This is basically what the vaccine looks like. It's pretty much fluid with all these particles inside. Now, what are these particles? A lot of things have been said about, oh, the vaccine is such that you have this thing that will go and change your genetic code, and we don't know what that is going to do to you. Your life will be different. So I'm going to just put it in simple words. So if I'm going to be very honest with you, what we've actually done is tricked the virus. The virus is, the vaccine is pretty much, especially the Pfizer vaccine, is pretty much a made-up virus. A virus is pretty much a cylindrical carbohydrate protein coat with DNA or RNA inside. So we have two types of viruses. We have RNA viruses and DNA viruses. COVID is an RNA virus. And what it would do, this is what, if a virus infects you today, if you get a common cold, because viruses cannot replicate themselves, so they're not capable of reproduction. The only way they can reproduce is infect a host and get the hosts to use its own mechanisms to reproduce the virus. So what we've actually done is create a dummy virus, put it in the form of a vaccine. But what we've done is taken away all the parts of the virus, all the genetic code of the virus that would form a new virus, and we just specifically, in the case of the Pfizer vaccine, specifically for the spike protein. Now, when you get this vaccine, what this made-up virus will do is it will infect your cells like it would normally do, use the genetic material in your cell to create the spike protein. And then the body is so astute to anything that is new, and the body will immediately recognize that, oh, this protein is foreign. It doesn't belong to this body normally, and to create antibodies, but to also create what's called T-cell immunity, which is other immunity in your body to actually cope with coronavirus. And this means that if you now then get coronavirus, your body is ready to be able to fight coronavirus. This is, in simple terms, what this does. The reason why this vaccine doesn't make you as sick as coronavirus itself is that when coronavirus infects your cell, step one is the same step, because the virus enters your body, it will inject its genetic material into your body. But step two, when the genetic material is used to make spike proteins in the case of a vaccine, in case of an infection, it will create new viral particles. It will create plenty of these viral particles such that the cell within which it has been created is destroyed, and the new viruses are then released to infect other cells. But that doesn't happen in a vaccine. What happens in a vaccine just has spike proteins and antibodies are created. When those antibodies are created, it may make you feel ill. And actually, apparently that's been correlated to a response to the vaccine. You might feel a little bit ill because your body has reacted to a foreign body. It will create what we call inflammation, either at the site or in your entire body. So firmly, there's no chip in it. Some people say, oh, it's altering your genetic code. If this vaccine is going to alter your genetic code, then every time you have a cold, every time you have a viral infection, your genetic code is being altered, because that's what viruses do. Inject the genetic material into you and use your own mechanisms to produce new viruses. That is how viruses work. We know that. So it is actually smartly using the way viruses normally infect people to smartly trick the body to create antibodies to coronavirus without making you so sick. So it's actually quite smart. The other virus is the AstraZeneca virus. The other vaccine is AstraZeneca vaccine. In this case, rather than create a new virus, what they've done is weaken a known virus, it's an adenovirus, it's a chimpanzee virus, and then injected part of the genetic code for coronavirus in the genetic code of that virus, and then let the virus do its thing. Go into the body, inject the genetic material. It will create spike proteins, but also create viral particles. But because the virus has been inactivated, it won't make you sick, but it will create the antibodies as well that will protect you from a future infection. So plain and simple, there is absolutely no chip in it. what we've actually done is used how viruses infect us normally every day to trick the body to create antibodies. And so and people say, oh, we've never used it's new science. To be honest, it's not that new. I was reading an editorial the other day, and some of the science behind this has existed since the 70s, but it's just never been developed. Because of the pressure of time and the pressure of the pandemic, knowing how sick people were, it has allowed us to accelerate the science to vaccine development. And actually, it's an ingenious way of making vaccines rather than the old method. So I hope that kind of helps to rationalize this issue, because I mean, there's been a lot of sort of conjecture about vaccines out there, also going into the rapidity of vaccine development. And my clear answer to that is, when we have an international worldwide tragedy, what happens is that money meets science. When money meets science, new things are developed. A lot of the technology we use today were as a result of money meeting science during World War II. You won't believe this, the supercomputer was generated in Brackley Hall by coders who were decoding German bombers. Now that accelerated our technological advancement. Same thing has happened now. We've had these technologies, people have been doing PhDs, people have been submitting theses and doing stuff about doing stuff on vaccine development, but it's never really made it because funding streams are limited, especially when the need wasn't there. When merely the need met the science, it accelerated a lot of the work that had actually already been done and led us to create the vaccine that we have. And believe you me, this vaccine has been tested in a lot of people before it's actually come into the clinical sphere. And with every drug, because I keep getting asked the question, oh, we need to test it first before I take it. With every drug goes into what we call phase trials. So we have phase 3 trials, and in phase 3 trials, you use a drug. So every drug we have today is in a phase 3 trial where actually there might be idiosyncratic reactions. That's the reactions not related to the drug or to the dose, but just related to the interface between the drug and human beings that you will find. But you would never know if there isn't population utilization of the drug or of the vaccine. Every drug, every vaccine has side effects. But every time we bring new interventions to medicine, it's always a balance between risk and benefit. But clearly, the way people have been dying from COVID and the pandemic we have tilts that risks really well towards benefit rather than risk. So my personal opinion is to implore you to take the vaccine, because I think it provides some protection and might help us fight this pandemic.
نعم. السلام عليكم. وعليكم السلام. جزاكم الله خير. نعم تفضل.
Excellent, Dr. Hakim Yusuf. I think the problem with the pandemic, according to the WHO, is we're going to be dealing with two things. We're dealing with the pandemic, and we are also dealing with infodemic. Infodemic in the sense that, so this is part of the new semantics that has come with the pandemic. And part of infodemic is social misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation and disinformation is as old as information itself. And this is very important. We are Muslims. And Allah made it clear in the Quran and Kareem. And I think what is important is, because what's not spoken of is the fact that some of the people, the source through which the data and everything is coming from, are non-Muslims. We have quite a number of people who have their hesitancy. I do remember looking at one of the Arabic literatures, and it's quite clear. It's called Taraddud al-Talhiq. It's called vaccine hesitancy, which in the Arab world, in Africa, and everywhere, people have problems with vaccines, including the injection itself, putting a needle inside some. Some people are so needlephobia that they can't get close to it. But what is important, and one of the things we haven't spoken about, and part of the information, misinformation and disinformation is around what happened in the 70s when in America, a number of Afro-Caribbeans were part of the polio study, which didn't go down well, and some of the problems we find that in other parts of the world. For us as Muslims, what is important is when things are not clear, when it's not clear, how do you go about it? Apart from hearing it from Dr. Hakim Yusuf or mine. Most of the misinformation and disinformation came via social media, some from Facebook, WhatsApp. But Allah made it clear. Say who you will believe. When a piece of information comes to you, because Allah knows that when it comes to diseases and everything, the cure, he brought us all to this world. We've come to serve different purposes. Some will be scientists. You cannot be an Hafiz al-Quran and be a PhD holder in vaccinology and no, some people will have to do it. If it comes from a source that you don't think you believe in, what do? You need to investigate. If you're going to travel from the UK to America or to Nigeria, and you want to see information about passports, do not go by what a friend tells you. You will go on the website, scrutinize, ensure everything is clear. And this is what I want to get across to us in the African and Asian community. When the information comes, we look at it critically with the little knowledge Allah has given us, and then we follow it up. So when we deal with misinformation and disinformation, talking about microchips, Bill Gates, for people who were born in the 70s, we know of some of our classmates with polio, one very thin leg from polio. BCG vaccines, all these vaccines we've taken before. The rapidity and the success rate about this, as Dr. Hakim Yusuf has mentioned, is about the funding. Research is about numbers. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine or the two vaccines, getting up to 30,000 patients, 42,000 patients within a very short period. That could have taken almost 10, 15, 20 years if it didn't affect parts of the world where people know that this disease doesn't respect a prime minister or a president of the United States. Hence the reason this happened so quickly. So we have to be extremely, and also for people, when it comes to, according to WHO, when it comes to disinformation and misinformation, it also includes people who are giving information wanting people to take the virus and to take the vaccine. So it's not only about people who are scaremongering. So if you want to pass information about the vaccine, you need to pass the right information and leave people to take their decisions. Because if you then force people through plethora of information, somebody who doesn't fit the criteria may just go for it and then develop severe reactions. So it's important when we get any information, we must remember with the pandemic is also infodemic, which includes misinformation and disinformation.
Jazakumullah khair for that point there. It's a very important one. Now, if you don't mind, Dr. Wajid, if I ask you in terms of, have there been anything in terms of the long-term data that we have in terms of the side effects of this sort of COVID or vaccine, or mainly the COVID really, and it's COVID vaccine, the long-term sort of side effects or data that we have in terms of this, and things like it, so there have been a lot of discussion in terms of its affecting infertility and things along those lines. I mean, if you are able to shed some light on this point, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan. There isn't a lot of long-term data on the COVID vaccines because they are newly developed. But that doesn't mean they're not safe. A new car, everyone would like to have a new 2021 Mercedes driving car. There's no long-term data. It's a 2021 version. How is there long-term data on that? So how do we know that this car does not have 100 times more accidents? How do we know this car isn't fall apart or catch on fire? We don't know that 100% because we don't have the long-term data. It's a new car, but we know that there have been a lot of other cars like it. It's using roughly the same technology. We're very much out of experience. Same new phone, new anything. 2021 phone is going to be 2021 phone. There's not going to be any long-term data on that. It doesn't mean it's not safe. But this is exactly the problem. Brothers and sisters, people trying to convince you that it's new, so it's unsafe. That's not true. It is new. It doesn't mean it's unsafe. And this is exactly it. There's my teachers taught me once that shaitan, he likes to be not in the darkness. He likes to be half in the darkness and half in the light, because that's the place of confusion. So what happens with a lot of these things is that there is some truth there, there's some accurate information, and then they take it to a different level. I'll give you an example. Fertility, you asked. My phone number, mobile phone number, it has a 7 in it. Brother Abdul Hakim, does your phone number have a 7 in it?
Yes, it does. Yes.
So does that mean that I can hack your phone?
No.
But I have a 7 and you have a 7. This is the logic of the fertility question. The fertility question is because one of the spike proteins is similar to the spike protein on an egg. So someone made a very unscientific, unproven, inaccurate statement that they said one of the protein on the vaccine or the virus is similar to one of the protein on the egg, so therefore it can affect fertility. There is no evidence for this. Just like me saying that my phone number has a 7, your phone number has a 7, so my phone number it's the same as yours, it can affect your phone number. It's not, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense scientifically the same way. And we know there's been 15, 20 million people in this country have had the vaccine. And you can see how many side effects the people have had. You can see how many people have died from the vaccine. There's not one yet up to now, not one proven person has died from the vaccine, and 15, 20 million people had it. If you gave 15, 20 million people penicillin, at least some people would have died from that by now. This is the kind of information you need, that wait a minute, it's actually very safe. Does that mean that it's going to be 100% safe? No, we didn't say that. Let me give you just one more story. Every year in Hajj, several thousand people die for a variety of reasons. They die, heart attack or heat stroke or something happens, they die. Does that mean Hajj killed them? Does that mean Hajj is a killer? You can die. No, their time happened. They were on Hajj, but it was their time, and at that time and this location, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to take them. It's the same with the vaccine. You give the whole country, if you give the whole country the vaccine, some of those people will die. Maybe it has nothing to do with the vaccine, right? So what we're trying to say is that let's have a balance, exactly like has been said by our other speakers, mashallah, is that let's have a balance. When you look at the positive, and the negative. Yes, we want there to be more data. Who does not want more data? We want more data on the vaccine. Yes, we want better safety profile. Yes, we also, the medics, we have to take it ourselves. We're human beings, right? We're not like, oh yeah, just inject us with whatever. We have to give it to our parents. So what we're saying is that we looked at all the negatives. We want more data. We want more information. Yes, we would like less side effects, all these things. And on the other side, the COVID. 120,000 people have died in this country. Disproportionate amongst them are ethnic minorities, which are us. And not only that, if you get the virus, we haven't even talked about the people who are getting long COVID, who are having big problems. They have heart problems, they have lung problems, they have psychological problems. And then we haven't talked about the economic impact and the mental health impact. There's no comparison between these two. It's basically like the airplane is falling out of the sky. You're on the airplane, it's going to crash, and someone is giving you a parachute, and then you start saying, where did the parachute come from? Who made the parachute? What kind of parachute is this? You're going to do this while the airplane is going down? This is not normal. So all I'm saying is, I'm not saying don't ask questions. Ask questions, think about it, speak to the people of knowledge who have the information, and then make a decision, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair. That was a very, very good points you mentioned there. Dr. Hakeem Yusuf, there's been a few mentioning of things like pieces of fetus material being part of this vaccine. Either MRC5 fetal type materials and things along those lines. I mean, can you shed a little bit of light in terms of this? Is this something that we need to be concerned about or worried about?
Yeah, thank you very much. That is a very good observation. Like I mentioned, one thing I would want to reassure everybody of is one thing that's quite good as vaccine. Actually, I would have thought that, especially something like the Pfizer vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine is not a biological vaccine. That is, every component of Pfizer vaccine is actually synthesized. It's made in a lab, okay? So it's not linked to a piece of tissue that has been modified and injected into you. The AstraZeneca vaccine still has a killed virus, but doesn't have any human tissue in it. Some of the research behind COVID vaccines involved using fetuses in trying to understand the science. So if you look at research development, you usually start at the bench. There's experimental work, and sometimes in creating the conditions that will make you generate your hypothesis or generate your intervention, we use animals in the lab, but some of this sort of science evolved from that point. But the vaccine we have today has nothing to do with fetuses. It's entirely made in the lab. It's recombinant DNA RNA technology. We can make pieces of RNA in the lab. RNA is a combination of proteins and other molecules put together. And once we know the code, which we now know how to do, we can sequence the whole of our genome. Once we know the code, you can actually use lab techniques to generate the RNA. And so where we are today with the vaccine is quite far away from some of those experimental work. You're not getting vaccines that have human fetuses in them. Now, I've also been asked this question that, so what is the ethics? I mean, if they've used fetuses to find this information, if you're saying today the vaccine has nothing to do with fetuses, but is there a morality in using it when you know the information came from there? And I would say this, right? There's a lot of things we use in medicine today that have their backgrounds from all sorts, from being accidental. Quite a lot of what we do today in medicine, to be honest, was discovered accidentally, to things that we may actually ascribe to practices that are that you might actually want to question the ethics. However, the information is there. Now, I think it would be wrong not to use that information to save human life, because we do that every day. every day in the clinical space. We use information we have to save human lives. I think what's really important is to say that, and let me also make a point. The recent development of this vaccine had nothing to do with fetuses. It was a long time ago. Some of the basic science involved it, but it generated information. Now, the equipoise I'm trying to throw out is that information could have been derived other ways, but it came out through this body of research. And it leaked out and everybody went, oh, we're using vaccines made from fetuses to vaccinate people. Please be reassured, the vaccine you're getting today, the knowledge that led to it, like I said, has been going on for years, might have come from some of those research, but the vaccine itself doesn't have fetuses in it. Doesn't have anything related to it. It's entirely engineered in the lab. It's biomedical engineering. It's brilliant. It's totally synthesized. So there's nothing biological in those viruses. I want to add a point that Dr. Wajid said earlier about pregnancy and stuff. And I think he really put it really well. But in my line of work, I monitor the epidemiology of COVID every week. And in December and January, we really had a difficult situation in our hands. The situation was whereby we had a high volume of pregnant women with severe COVID in ICU, and most of them were of ethnic minorities. Now, it was so concerning that NHS England is now looking into it. Now, the reason why I raise this is that one of the things I've put forth to this is that I have a worry that if a lot of African and ethnic minority women don't take COVID because of fertility concerns, when they get pregnant and they have severe COVID, the outcomes are worse. So please don't take this sort of hearsay about impact on fertility to deny yourself the vaccine, because we're seeing a trend evolving where we're seeing a lot, especially in the severe end of the disease, a lot more pregnant women. So it's just to please put that in your decision making when you're balancing it out, that is an additional risk. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair for your answer. There's very good points that you've touched on there. I think I'm just going to ask two more questions, inshallah, and then we'll if there's any sort of final points that the panelists want to add, then they can do that. The first really is that go to Dr. Balogun, inshallah. Are you starting to see the effect of some of these measures that have been put in? Be it the vaccine and the other sort of things that have been put in by the government in terms of its effect on hospital admissions and things along those lines.
Allah khair for the question. I think the information is out there for us to see. Two things have worked in this crisis. One is social distancing, and the other one is the vaccine program. When I use the word worked, is how the data has tracked events and outcomes, and you can see that the lockdown, which comes under social distancing, you can see the effect. Some of the things what you witnessed when the lockdown happened, and that's why people were saying it happened too late, is because if you do have the lockdown today, you're not going to see the effect immediately. The virus is everywhere. We know that the incubation period of the virus, what do we mean by that? From infection to when you develop symptoms could be as short as 5-6 days. And it could be as long as 14-28 days. That's why you see husband and wife, somebody will have it, the other person doesn't have it. The other person comes back from the hospital, and then the spouse then develops symptoms. So what we have noticed is, whilst the infection had been everywhere, and this is a very important point, particularly when you're struggling with misinformation and disinformation, when you're not sure which one to believe. They said with social distance is not having any effect. Now we're having so many deaths. Yes, because a lot of people have been infected. It's been all over the place. It keeps spreading. So when you get to the peak of capping, and that's why it's easier to predict based on science and epidemiology to say the nature of this group of virus or viruses or from the first wave, this is how it behaves. Hence the reason we've now come to the point, to the extent that we were able to predict to say, come so time, 18th or 17th of December, that's when we have most death. Yes, because the number of infections that were diagnosed per day, you could predict when people are going to come down in 2 weeks' time, or 5 days, or 10 days' time. So the vaccine program and social distancing, you can say there are some factors are confounding there. Having said that, we've started seeing the effect. The number of patients in the hospital have gone down. The number of admissions have gone down. Even the severity of the illness, we can see, has been reduced to some extent, and the data tracks this. So what I would say to people, because when we're having this conversation, what is important is what people then take away to inform their judgment as to what they would like to do or not to do, is that people should continue to observe the rules and regulations around social distancing, hand washing, because that's what we've got evidence for. And when it comes to the decision about vaccine, we've also got evidence for that in terms of spread, in terms of hospital admissions, relatively, and in terms of severity of the illness.
Now, Jazakallah khair for your answer there. And I'm just going to ask the last question to Dr. Wajid, inshallah. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the you touched on slightly before about long COVID and some of the symptoms that perhaps people ought to sort of look out for, or what they should do if they're starting to experience some of these symptoms?
So if someone has long COVID, that means they've had COVID. And if you're getting symptoms, firstly, that I would say that there's a lot of worry that people can have. And I would say that, look, a lot of the people, most of the people will recover. From what we're seeing, that it takes longer and longer periods of times. Some people, they don't feel anything, but others, like Dr. Hakim said, they can be very unwell. It's a spectrum. So and you can be unwell for a long time, even if you had a standard chest infection, just a normal chest infection, you could take 6 weeks on average to get better. So before if it takes up to 6 weeks, we're not worried. We got a lot of people that come to the GP, doctor, I'm still coughing, I can't believe it. I had, it's been 1 week already. We said, don't worry, relax. It's been 2 weeks, go home. 4 weeks, but as long as you're getting slowly better. So 6 weeks is normal. After 6 weeks, we start getting a little bit more, we're going to start, you should be going to your doctor, you should be asking questions, you should be going in. But with long COVID, it's beyond 6 weeks. People are getting tired, or they're having breathlessness, or they're having other symptoms. If you feel unwell, we would recommend go and see your doctor and be very specific. One problem that happens a lot of times in our community is that we go to the doctor and we say, I'm sick. Finished. Your problem now. Up over to you. You sort it out. And what we see with others is that they come with a very detailed, like they say, okay, doctor, on this date, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. If you make the doctor's life easy, they're going to make your life easy as well. So write it down, then go to the doctor. If you have translation issues, bring someone with you. Nowadays, almost everyone is doing telephone interviews. So have someone with you, get the information ready, explain it as clearly as you can, practice it beforehand, because then they will help you with the next steps. There are going to be clinics for long COVID that are set up. But the number one thing I would say right now is don't lose hope, inshallah. that you will recover. The majority of people will recover. It just means it's going to take longer. And a lot of the battle is physical, but a lot of it is up here as well. So push yourself to contact your healthcare specialist about long COVID.
Naam, Jazakallah khair. I think there was a just very last question by someone, and then we're going to round it up there. Abdul Majid. Right. Okay. I think can someone unmute him, please, so that we can end in the next few minutes. Can't hear you.
Who's the question from again?
Abdul Majid, Mujid Adams Magaji. He's got his hands up.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's done.
Thanks.
Jazakumullah khairan to the panelists for the brilliant session. My very last question, I don't know, I think Dr. Hakim touched upon this earlier on. One of the common questions that people ask, and I've actually seen people who've had the vaccine and they are still testing positive. So how do we explain? If you could explain to us what the role of the vaccine and the reason why some people are still testing positive and all that, just to clarify a bit of the conception about that. Dr. Hakim, anyone can answer?
Thank you very much. That's true. I've had colleagues who've had the vaccine, 2 doses to be fact, the 2 doses, and still had the infection. So the infection has 2 roles. One is to reduce infectivity to the virus, and the second is to reduce the severity of illness. And I think that the matrix there is really very important. And the marker of a successful vaccine is if you can reduce the severity of the illness. Because we know we've been doing flu vaccinations for years, people who have flu vaccines still get flu, but they're just not as sick. So the advantage of reducing transmissibility of the vaccine was high initially with people who had primary infection. But now we're having variants, and we know that what was happening with the new variants, the mutations in the variants is such that the spike protein, which is where the virus binds to your cells, has changed, and it may escape some aspects of the antibody creation you might have created from either infection or vaccines. So you can still be infected. The anticipation is that you will have milder disease. And if you look at the data that was presented for the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, there's a publication actually just yesterday. There's the AstraZeneca, the Pfizer vaccine reduces moderate to severe infection by 92%, and the Moderna by 91%, Moderna by 92%. So you're still going to get some people who will progress and get severe disease. But, we're not all the same. People have different sort of backgrounds. Some people are immunocompromised. They have diseases and underlying conditions, their immunity is low. So their ability to generate antibodies is lower. They're already taking drugs to suppress their immunity. So, but generally on a population sense, your ability to actually fall so ill that you will need to come into hospital and need a lot of support will be vastly reduced by COVID-19 vaccine. It may not stop you from having a second dose of a second infection with the vaccine. Now, I have some friends in America in the CDC, and they're growing group of people. I know they publish and share a lot of information about virus sequestration. That theory has come about because, I don't know if you're aware that COVID jumped from bats and Ebola jumped from bats. And lately, we know that Ebola actually sequesters in the gonads, so in the testicles in men and the ovaries in women, and there's some reports of people reinfecting people with Ebola. And some people have talked about that as well with COVID. Now, to be clear, there's no evidence yet of that happening, and we don't know if that has a huge impact. Most of the patients who have COVID from a reinfection, but if you've been vaccinated, if you've been vaccinated, you can still have a reinfection, but hopefully you'll be in that 92% group that wouldn't have severe infections, and you just feel ill, be at home, use paracetamol and get better. Also, we find that people who are vaccinated have a shorter illness. than people who are not vaccinated. So the time to resolution is quicker than people who don't have a vaccine.
Jazakallah khair for your answer there. It was a nice answer for us to sort of a nice question for us to sort of end up to summarize everything that we've discussed. Inshallah, I'm just going to call Ustaz Tawfiq, inshallah, just to give some closing remarks, inshallah, and then we'll end the session because I know sort of Maghrib is upon us, inshallah.
Bismillah wa sallallahu wa sallimu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallimu taslima. I want to say humbly, with joy in my heart and smiles on my face, Jazakumullahu khairah to our brothers, the doctors in the house. Dr. Wajid, it was really good to see you. Barakallahu feekum, may Allah reward you. Dr. Hakim Yusuf, you have blown me away with the merge of your professionalism with the ability to even do the public speaking. Jazakumullahu khairah. Dr. Balogun, we know you already before. May Allah Ta'ala reward you. And our in-house doctor, Dr. Abdul Hakim Adetunji, for chairing the occasion, and Dr. Adams and other doctors in the house for adding to our knowledge. You see, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he said, he taught us a concept of perfectionism in our religion. إِذَا فَعَلُوا شَيْءٍ فَأَحْسَنُوا. Muslims, when you want to do something, make sure you perfect it, do it properly. And he gave us an example of even when you want to slaughter, make sure you sharpen the knife properly. That also applies to our professional lives as doctors, accountants, real estate investors and all that, and things that we do. And I'm saying this because I'm just overjoyed with this session. Whoever is listening or watching this in the future, whatever we do, let's do it properly, because there is a reward for linking what we do excellently to the way we also earn our livelihood. On this note, I end by saying Jazakumullahu khairah. Before I leave, Dr. Hakim, Dr. Wajid, please note that the Muslim platform, we would want to invite you again in the future. And please expect that invitation. And inshallah ta'ala, I will try to speak to you myself. I ask Allah to reward everyone, brothers behind the scene, who had contributed to the success of this program and other ones. I ask Allah alone to reward all of you. Allahumma la tada lana dhanban illa ghafarta, wala amma illa qadayta, wala maridun illa shafayta, wala hajata min awaij dunya wal akhirah illa qadaytahu ya rahmanur rahim ya dhal jalali wal ikram wa ya arhamar rahimin. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Bye.